creating my TV supplement for the last arc, I found myself particularly plagued with what reviewer SF Debris once dubbed "you forgotism," a condition wherein a little voice in my head would say, if you don't put it in the review, people will think you forgot. That's why I made sure to include screen caps of various filler segments I didn't talk about, such as the fight with Yock's Demon King and Puar transforming into the Keratizer Bunny, because, let's face it, there's a lot I'm not going to cover. I just can't. Pretty much every episode has some kind of alteration, be it added scenes, deleted scenes, a different order of scenes, and this format just does not lend itself to detailing and such scrutiny. Plus, like all of you, I really want to move forward to the 23rd Tenkaichi Budoukai Arc. If I go into everything about every episode and talk about music and animation and voices, then I'm going to be stuck here for years. So in a way, that makes this a much more selective and arbitrary look than my main Dragon Ball dissection videos, because it's only going to be about things that particularly interested me, or that I found to be especially significant to the manga storyline. That said, the reason I bring this up is because I actually did forget something I wanted to talk about last time. It's a minor thing, but it interested me because prior to this viewing in preparation for this sub-series, despite the fact that reading the manga has for years been my primary form of digesting Dragon Ball, it's something I never realized was filler. The TV series, at least in the first arc, decided that a Dragon Ball, when in close proximity to other Dragon Balls, glows. It's made a pretty big deal at first, but is fairly quickly dropped, which makes the whole thing feel inconsistent. Moving right along, the TV series began the second story arc on May 28, 1986, right as Kuririn is fighting General Blue in the manga. As for its first bit of filler, they start off with what I assume was intended to be some kind of running gag, as Yamcha's plane crashes before they're able to make it back home. As they're stranded in the jungle, a figure blows past them. As we'll soon find out, it's Kuririn on his way to Kame House, whose introduction is handled with various shots like these, including a glimpse at how he finds the rowboat we first see him in the manga. Funnily enough, that means his introduction in the second movie is actually closer to his manga roots than the actual adaptation is. Likewise, Lunch is given a completely new introduction. Her good form enters a saloon in a Wild West-type town, and the leader of a group of bounty hunters tries to hit on her. Then she sneezes and they recognize her from her wanted poster. They try to take her in, but she just shoots the place up and leaves. Then she uses a rocket launcher to derail and rob a train, which leads into the police chase that serves as her original introduction. Incidentally, this means that her good form is what we first see in the TV series, as opposed to her bad form, which is what we're introduced to in the manga. Also weird is that her wanted poster lists her reward in dollars, when this is far past the point where the concept of zenny has been introduced in the manga. And finally, I just love that player piano music that's used in the saloon. During all the training parts, Kame Sennin trying to do naughty things with Lunch while Lunch remains oblivious seems to be an easy go-to for filler. However, aside from that, we get to see Yamcha training for the Budokai too. He beats up an entire dojo, including this really big guy, which is impressive. However, when you see the occupants cowering in fear, most of them appear to be children, which is a little less impressive. Bluma and the others begin their filler shtick for this arc by peeping in through the window. Later, during the prelims, they try the same thing, as the anime makes it abundantly clear that only participants can enter the gymnasium. Remember that point for later. Actually, Bluma tries the same thing by forcing Oolong to hold her up. Oolong and a huge crowd try to look up Bluma's skirt, but when Kuririn throws his monk bully through the wall, that gives them a safer vantage point from which to watch. And hey, score a point for taking an element from the manga and integrating it into their filler. But as these scenes indicate, Bluma abusing Oolong is a common source for filler material throughout the first series. There's also an early bird cameo by Bacterian. Wow, can this arc introduce any character when they're supposed to be introduced? Apparently, Yamcha isn't satisfied with beating up kids who remind him of Goku, so he goes to train in the woods by himself and grows a beard. Or, well, stubble. But apparently this serves as Bluma's inspiration for convincing Yamcha to cut his hair. Also, as an aside, all this time spent with Bluma and the others means we first see the Western Metropolis much earlier in the anime than in the manga. Now, I'm of two minds about these Yamcha scenes. On one hand, I think they do what filler does best by expanding upon points mentioned in the story. The writers are seizing upon ideas Toriyama already created and are bringing them to life, so I find them very interesting to watch. On the other hand, though, from a pure storytelling perspective, they are not only pretty pointless, but they also ruin the surprise of Goku bumping into his friends at the tournament. We already know Yamcha's training for it and is going to be there. At this point in the manga, the story was still very new. For all we knew, we would never see Bluma and the others again. But I've always thought that for its original audience, most of them would have already read the manga anyway, and if I wanted the exact storyline of the manga, I'd just read the frickin' manga. I find the anime interesting because it's different, so I don't know. But that said, I guess the TV series realized that and just decided to wipe out any remaining trace of surprise, because they decided to have Goku meet everyone the moment they arrived to register instead of having him bump into Yamcha near the end of the preliminaries. That also leads to the fact that the TV series treats the major tournaments in a very different manner. In the manga, they're always on a single day. They arrive, register, fight, and finish without any interruptions. In the TV versions, they always arrive the night before to register, stay at a hotel, and then start fighting the next day. There are certainly variations which we'll get to. Aside from the fact that they move all those Yamcha and company scenes earlier, this one is relatively unchanged, and the hotel scene is just a shot of the two boys and their master sleeping. I guess Kame-Sennin has more funds later, since in future tournaments they don't have to share a bed. The next day the boys get their uniforms, which means I have to talk about colors for a moment. With some exceptions, Dragon Ball was largely a black and white experience, and yes, I know they recently released a full-color version of the manga. The TV version was, of course, in full color from the get-go. As such, there are lots of different color discrepancies between the two. For example, in the manga, Bluma has purple hair. In the TV series, she has blue hair, and that's probably because Toriyama drew her with blue hair in the first chapter. And that's part of why I'm not going to spend much time on coloring issues. Toriyama himself is woefully inconsistent with his own coloring, so it's hard to fault the anime for not being entirely consistent with him. More importantly for me, I'm colorblind, which makes any in-depth nitpicking on my part nearly impossible. Chances are I've never even noticed most of them. However, in this case, the Kame Dogi is fairly iconic, and Toriyama pretty consistently colors it with a bright orange. Hell, I've seen a lot of translations refer to it as a yellow, which just confuses me, but again, colorblind. And that's obviously not counting the limited color red and grayscale chapters. But maybe they were counting that, since the TV series presents the uniforms as a very reddish orange. The kanji is in a yellow circle instead of white, and the belts are black instead of blue. I don't mind this choice. I prefer the orange. I do find it weird that they don't match the belts to the wrist guards and shoes, though. That's just a terrible fashion faux pas. One more color thing is that Kuririn is pretty well known in the TV series for having eyes that aren't colored. That is, they're the same color as the rest of his face. In the manga, however, he has white eyes just like everyone else. And for his first several episodes in the TV series, it's the same way. It's only a little ways into the finals that he inexplicably loses this trait. This is somewhat off point, but I will say that the finals of this tournament are very, very nostalgic for me. Once I got into the Japanese version, these episodes were among the first fan sub tapes I got during the summer of 2000. Technically, they weren't fan subs at all, but home recordings of a subtitled version that aired in Hawaii many years ago. But they were the first episodes of the original series I ever saw in Japanese, and I spent that summer peddling them to all my friends' houses. As such, I love these episodes very dearly, and it was nice to finally see them in DVD quality this year for the first time. When I first watched these episodes, though, something I always found odd was the announcer's claim that Kuririn was going to lose without having landed a single blow, even though I'd clearly seen Kuririn whack Bacterian in the face earlier. Well, after I read the manga where he doesn't hit him until the end, this made sense. See, this is an example of bad filler. They expanded the fight a little bit, but then neglected to alter the manga line. That said, they do fix the inconsistency with Kuririn's number in the manga. There he draws 1, but is afterwards shown in the second spot. Here he draws 2 from the outset. Also, for some reason, when Kuririn delivers his match-winning fart, he actually pulls down his pants in the animated version. My favorite bit of filler in this section, though, is when Goku's and Giron's fight is interrupted by a sudden rainstorm. They take refuge in a bar, and that same awesome piano piece is playing again. Sadly, I think this is its last appearance, but I guess it's hard to get a lot of mileage out of it. After all, how many times can people play piano in this show? But as the gang regroups, Yamcha warns Goku about how fearsome Giron is because, expositing is what Yamcha does. Then there's a typical bar scene done in hilarious Dragon Ball style where Giron comes in hat and trench coat no less, and orders milk only to be made fun of by the monks. Are all these ordering monks terrible people? Anyway, Giron beats all of them up so we can see how tough he is. Both Yamcha and Goku intervene, and apparently Giron finds Yamcha to be such a goody-goody that just being around him makes Giron itch. But before Goku and Giron can go at it, Jackie steps in to say that fighting outside of the tournament is grounds for disqualification, another anime-only rule. But I find this a lot of fun. It's a good setup for Giron, it's nice to see the characters together, and it's just good atmosphere. Around this time, the series starts using a custom title card animation for tournament episodes, although in this first tournament, it's very inconsistent. In some episodes it'll be there, and others it'll be gone. For the other main tournaments in the series, they'll use it for every episode. As I said when I covered this arc before, the Kyoken section of the Goku-Jackie fight is cut out, although I stand by what I said then. I think it could have easily worked outside of a text-based medium. Whatever. There's a cute little bit where Jackie slips up and almost gives away his identity. In order to protect it, he pulls out a scroll that justifies what he said by showing that he and the Muten Roshi are actually related. Still, that's a very specific mistake to have prepared for. Now, in essentially every episode of every Dragon Ball series, there's a preview for the next episode, and in it, we're almost always greeted by what has become Goku's animated catchphrase, "Os, ora Goku," or, "Hey, this is Goku." Well, when Jackie fires his massive Kamehameha to stop the transformed Goku, the episode ends on the cliffhanger that Goku is dead. While the images contained within show that Goku is indeed still alive, in a very nice touch they have Bluma open the preview instead. As far as I know, this is the only time outside of Dragon Ball Kai that another character handles the preview. Even in parts of the series where Goku is actually dead, he still does the preview. Finally, a filler section leading to the end of the fight contains Dragon Ball's first insert song, Mezaze Tenkaichi, which you heard at the beginning of this video. I love this song and I love that scene. The next arc is going to go crazy with the idea of insert songs, though. Also, in regards to the final part of this fight scene, it's something I don't know if I can really give the TV series full credit for because it's mentioned in the manga and kinda shown too, but the TV series really brings this sunset effect breathtakingly to life. It makes an already good fight that much more dramatic. The set pieces of the sunset and the Tenkaichi battle arena just make this fight look so distinctive, a distinctiveness that unfortunately later battles in the series would lack. I will say though that the transition wasn't exactly handled smoothly. In one shot, Jackie gets knocked down and it's broad daylight. Oh hey, suddenly the sky's a totally different color. To continue our look at the animation teams, episode 14 marked the introduction of the last of what I consider the original 6, Aoshima Katsumi, who as far as I can tell didn't have a studio and was just a freelance animation supervisor. He had worked as a key animator under Maeda Minoru in episode 8 before taking this role. Despite his apparent lack of an official studio, I think his work might be my favorite of all. It always looks good, it animates well, it's very distinct. You'll probably hear me mention eyes a lot, but it's always the eyes that are the first thing that allows me to distinguish an animation studio. Aoshima's character's eyes just have a sharpness to them that looks really good, yet it doesn't feel overly angular like some of Toriyama's later drawings. Switching gears completely though, Studio Live is by far my least favorite animation studio of the bunch. It was primarily overseen by Ebisawa Yukio, but most fans I've encountered know it as Triangle Guy. And that's because all of Studio Live's work is just pointy. For example, characters have extremely long heads that end in very pointy chins, and it even animates poorly. Now, I took martial arts for 9 years when I was a kid, and one of the first things I learned was to always pivot your base foot while kicking, otherwise any attempt to lift your leg that high will result in injury. There are so many times watching Studio Live episodes that I am in pain when I watch the characters kick. The body was not designed to move that way. Yeesh. Even so, on occasion the studio churned out some decent work, and in especially cartoon scenarios their style is somewhat charming. All of Dragon Ball's cast is great, and most of them were already revered veterans of the industry when they started. Furuya Toru was already famous as the voice of Amuro Ray from the original Mobile Suit Gundam, and apparently didn't even have to audition when he was cast as Yamcha. Tsuru Hiromi brings such a wonderful range to Bluma, which is especially good at this point in the series. She is fairly shrewish, and while Tsuru captures that, she also provides a warmth and sweetness that keeps her from being unlikable. The late Miyauchi Kohei is similar in his abilities to effortlessly switch between perverted sleaze and venerable teacher. I could go on about every single voice, but there's really only so much I can say beyond, they're great. But I do find it interesting how this arc utilizes 2 Dr. Slump actors as major players. Koyama Mami, the voice of Arale, was brought back to portray Lunch, and Utsumi Kenji, Senbei, who had already portrayed Shenlong, now goes in a totally different direction for the tournament announcer, a performance I've always adored. He would pick up various roles over the next several years, including Commander Red and Rikum. Sadly, he didn't stick around through all of Zeus. When the announcer comes back years later in the Buu arc, it's no longer him. Finally, episode recaps start becoming the norm here during the finals. They actually do some pretty creative things here, like overlaying the bracket over the footage and crossing out the character portraits we see earlier, and some of it required some effort to edit and isolate footage, so it's not yet just an easy way to pad out an episode. So, that's my take on the TV version of the 21st Tenkaichi Budoukai Arc. Next time we'll move on to the Red Ribbon Army Arc. See you there!